Welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a few stragglers as we progress. So good afternoon and welcome to the first of the Thiel Forums of the 2023-2024 academic year. My name is Dr. Jared Hammond, and I am happy to be coordinating the Thiel Forum as well as the Thiel Forum Special Edition this year. I use the term coordinating quite intentionally, because while I facilitate a lot of the beating of the bushes to offer our colleagues the opportunity to share their research and experiences, and you should anticipate a bit more outreach in the coming weeks and months, the beauty of these forums is that they are comprised of our faculty and staff, colleagues, and sometimes students, ideas, findings, and sometimes fundings. These events were started about 10 years ago by Dr. Mary Teresa Hall of the Department of English, so that faculty, staff, and staff members could come together once a month to discuss and share topics of research and interest, and to enjoy each other's company, and when budgets permit, cookies. For as much as Thiel is a close-knit institution, and we really are, I can remember as a newer and sometimes not so new faculty member thinking that I often had no idea what my colleagues were doing, whether in their research endeavors or in their teaching applications. So this is a really great opportunity for us to share of ourselves, right, and to help one another as we're on this journey. The Thiel community enjoyed the forums for about 7 years, but then the COVID pandemic emerged, requiring the temporary hiatus of these events. But as of last year, we are back. And I'm very happy to be kicking off what will assuredly be a great year. We've got a full fall schedule so far, but if you are interested in presenting, there is some availability remaining in the spring. So please contact me if you're interested in sharing your research, or if you have a particular topic or area of interest that you'd like to share with us. For the Thiel Forum Special Edition, we've got a series of AI-focused sessions that we're going to be having. So that will kick off September 26th, I believe is the first, 28th, thank you, September 28th. The October session is fully devoted to AI and higher education, and then we'll have one of the 2 sessions at our November Thiel Forum Special Edition dedicated to AI. So that's something hopefully everybody can look forward to, and will be publicized in the coming weeks. So our first group to kick off our Thiel Forum this year is Dr. Sheila Gross and Professors Sean Oros and Taylor, joining us from the Department of English. So Dr. Gross has advised that she would love to introduce herself and her collaborators to us this afternoon. So with no additional gilding the lilies, may I present the 4C participants on college composition.
Good afternoon. Early evening, everyone. We are excited to be kicking off the Thiel Forums this year with a discussion on first-year writing. So as you can see, the title of our presentation today is Comments on College Composition, the Core Curriculum, and First-Year Writing. So I'm Dr. Sheila Gross, Assistant Professor of English. I also serve as the English Department Assessment Coordinator, along with my colleague Sean Oros, who really needs no introduction, but I will introduce him in a moment. This is Professor Taylor McKelvey-Hughes. She's an adjunct instructor of English in our department. She teaches all of the classes in our first year curriculum, so that's English 101, INDS 101, and SEMS 110. And finally, Professor Sean Oros, first year curriculum coordinator of English, and first year curriculum coordinator and English lecturer. Yeah. There really are no 2 better people to discuss our first year writing courses on this campus than Taylor and Sean. Taylor is teaching, 13 writing courses across multiple institutions this semester, 13 this semester, including Thiel. Sean has been working on the first year curriculum as well as teaching our first year students since he started here in 2021. He has been consciously improving the first year courses, often really behind the scenes, to better meet the needs of our students within the confines of our existing courses. He collaborates with all the English 101 and INDS 101 instructors to improve this curriculum, and he also negotiates among a lot of different departments and stakeholders on campus like administration, staff, and faculty. And in addition to these full-time jobs, Taylor and Sean are actively pursuing their PhDs in composition and applied linguistics at IUP. In fact, directly after we are done presenting, unfortunately we cannot stay for Tressa's because they have class at 5:30 till 8 on Zoom, so we have to leave so that they can get home to go to class. So today we will provide an overview of the talk that we gave at a composition conference and the takeaways from the conference that have especially implications for Thiel. I want to point out something on this slide to you, and that is, you'll see our graduation years. We stand here as alumni and now dedicated instructors of this institution. So we are really invested in opening dialogue about and finding ways to enhance our first year writing courses, if we go that route, to better meet the needs of the students that are stepping onto Thiel's campus today. So we hope that by the end of our presentation, you will also be invested in moving this dialogue further as we look toward revising the core curriculum. So first, our conference. We presented at the Conference on College Composition and Communication, or 4Cs, in Chicago in February 2023. It is the national conference of the country that draws thousands of scholars and practitioners in composition studies. The title of our presentation there was Making a Way for Hope, a Rural College's Adaptive Advising Model and its First Year Writing Curriculum. The focus of our talk at the conference was inspired by the CFP, which focused on doing hope in desperate times, and also the Tomcat Way and the mini grant that we received from the Tomcat Way. And one of the requirements, or opportunities I should say, of getting that grant is to talk to you about what we did at the conference and our takeaways from it. So at the conference, we introduced Thiel College, or at our panel, the English 101 college writing class and the Tomcat Way advising model to the attendees that came to our talk. This is us at the Bean in Chicago, by the way. We didn't take a selfie of us presenting, so that's what you get. So in our talk, we took the opportunity to try to connect the Tomcat Way advising model more intentionally to our college writing course, and grounded our reflections on our class, students, and assessment results in composition and pedagogical research. So in our dialogue after we presented with the panel attendees, they were actually really inspired by our Tomcat Way advising model, so go Tomcats. And we concluded that our one semester introductory writing course really stays within the exploratory stage of the Tomcat Way. But in this dialogue, we talked about how we want students who complete our first year curriculum to enter into their sophomore year feeling like they have a stronger sense of writing, research, critical reading, and presentational and information literacy beyond that explore phase. We want them to feel like they have enough skills to envision themselves as contributors to their majors and feel like they belong in an institution that encourages academic writing and inquiry. So beyond our panel, we had many conversations with scholars and practitioners in the field of composition studies on resiliency in first year writing courses. So resiliency was a really big focus at this conference. There are various approaches to encourage resiliency among first year writers. This is what we learned. From devising assignments that range from low to high stakes to more intentional peer review and reflection exercises to community building exercises. One scholar argued at this conference that resiliency helps students to see that they have ownership of their own learning. While this is a really inspiring thought, we discovered that many of these scholars and practitioners build resiliency through 2, sometimes 3 writing-focused courses in the first and second years. We left the conference feeling really energized, but we still feel the challenge of being able to help our students build resiliency in a writing course that is only able to introduce the basics very quickly and compactly. Assessment. And this challenge, we feel, is reflected in our assessment results from 2022 and from 2023, which Sean will reflect on later. As you can see, our students did not meet the benchmark in 4 of the 5 categories, so those are the yellow ones. College writing is helping students with their syntax, that's in the green, which was a pleasant surprise for us, but it is underserving them in higher order concerns of the class. And so now Taylor will speak more to our takeaways from the conference.
Thank you. So much like Sheila said, we focused a lot on resiliency and how to incorporate that within functional composition. And being that I've taught composition, I think just as long as Sean has, we started around the same time, I've seen some growth within all composition courses with the way that we have redesigned the genres that we like to, as well as Sheila mentioned, across the 13 total composition courses that I teach at 5 different universities and colleges. And so the title of, or the theme of the conference was Doing Hope in Desperate Times, and this reflects a lot to this idea of resiliency and how the students are coming in a little bit more unprepared than they have in past years. So in some ways with having this one semester composition course, we're underserving our students. They're only in that exploratory phase that we mentioned, and they do not feel confident moving into their sophomore year or even their second semester freshman year within their major. And so the national standard is a 2-semester writing sequence. Some of the institutions that I currently instruct at, we have 2 or 4 sequence plans, and I teach all 4 of them. I will actually do all 4 of them within the same semester. At YSU, I teach 4 classes at a time, where I start from beginning to end. And some of the reasons for multiple composition courses would be a remedial one if we were outside of that 2 sequence. So with students coming in less and less prepared, a lot of students come into composition with this idea that they will gain a lot of skills that they need. We spend our first week focusing on study habits and mindsets, both in fixed mindsets and taking notes and all different kinds of skills, but that leaves us little time to tackle genres. So when we tackle 4 genres plus a reflective essay in 1 semester, it makes them have anxiety. That's a lot to do in 16 weeks, which is why we also have up the anxiety-inducing and fail rates. Being here for the short time, I think about 3 years, I have had students, the same students, retake composition with me, leave composition, and they pop up in my INDX class, and they're still struggling with the same core concepts that were introduced in this composition course. So our conference focused a lot on the current and upcoming needs for more writing instruction. Currently students, whether it's post-pandemic reasoning or not, need more writing instruction to succeed in their discipline. We make the sales pitch that they need writing, that there's discipline-specific writing, but sometimes we can't always meet those needs. And one note that I would like to add is the English department is one of the only departments that sees and has a direct impact on all students between our English 101 course and our honors English course. We get to see every student that comes through and have a direct impact on them, and so that's very powerful in being able to assist them through their 4 years until college. And I will pass this along to Sean.
Thank you, Taylor. All right. So, obviously, beyond the various findings that we were discussing at the conference, the discussions that we had, there's obviously very real situations that we're also navigating here at Thiel. So the question then becomes, how do we try and take these lessons that we've talked about, resiliency, national standards, best practices, how do we translate to those to our situations here so we can make the best experience for a student and really live out that Thiel mission in this case? The one takeaway that we can pretty much all agree on in the department, and probably beyond even, that there are challenges that come along with a 1 semester writing course. That doesn't mean that we need to necessarily add a second course, but the one thing that we can pretty much all agree on, I feel, is that there's definitely limitations to what you can achieve in a single semester. So what then do we want to achieve? What do we want to focus on? When the SLOs have to be narrowed down to such a select portion, where are we putting the needle towards? We're talking a few moments here. We already referenced people who are coming in, our incoming students, have a little bit more of a struggle with resiliency, specifically because of some trends nationally and to their preparation in reading and writing. How is that going to translate to helping them stay here, retain here, feel at home here within our first year curriculum? If it's a one-size-fits-all in one semester, we might have some kind of leverage towards our honor section that kind of self-separates some of the writers. But in general, still, we have some students who are in wildly different spectrums based on just their high school experience within our English 101 sections alone. Even in that case, you see wild disparity. There are, of course, additional challenges, somewhat for our lowest scored students in particular. It's not so much our highest scored students who are really the ones in danger here. It's the students who have taken the SAT now that has resumed, and the ones who are in the lowest percentile of scores that we see the most loss as well. And I'll show that graph in a moment. If that's the case, all of them are going to be in our English 101 class as well, in our INDS 101 as it currently stands. What can we do to really help support and scaffold those skills to help them succeed in their majors, to succeed and belong here at Thiel? How do we teach them that resiliency when if we're just throwing them at more of a troubled model for, let's say, composition, and they're just failing over and over again? It's great, actually, in testament. For instance, Taylor has had the situation where students have taken her over several times in English 101 or INDS 101, and they eventually pass that class. English 101 in particular, we tend to see this. But that still requires them to fail first, so it adds some extra challenge to that. Perhaps as a model we continue to work with, perhaps we continue to tweak in other ways. Whatever the case, we just need to be intentional about how we're actually framing that. So what are some of these other engaging techniques that we could put into our writing courses? Does it need to be jumping straight to research writing the first semester? Are there different methods that we might incorporate? Whether it be composition or kind of broadening it to more of a design focus and kind of expanding that definition a little bit. Perhaps letting students engage more with one of the conference topics we spoke about in one panel was creating zines, for instance, instead of a final research paper for the course. There's some pluses and minuses of both. Should we engage in some of these ideas? There's a great panel in particular, again, that Taylor found, that was about using video games in the first year composition course. What are some of the things that we can do? Should we do those though? Does that fit into our overall goal and objectives? What are we going to do that has the best yield for our students? Which is actually, again, we'll come back full circle to that. So we're kind of left with this broad landscape of options, which is part of the ongoing core discussion. That will be a big focus of this year in particular. As I said, lots of logistics in there. At the Hodge Institute, we had discussed that we'd be theoretically open to the idea of an English 102 section, but do we have the resources for an English 102 session? And if not, what do we do with the classes that we have, or at least the course slots that we have, to best facilitate that? Is it perhaps adding a specifically informational literacy course? Perhaps we work in INDS 101, or building more skill integration into INDS 101 to help facilitate some of these holes in what we're preparing our students for in that case. So, I referenced the scores. Just to briefly talk about this, and shout out to Tressa for having brought this report in a presentation, although I brought it to my attention before. Just to give you a sense of how this works. So, you can see the broad strokes here, the percentiles and so forth, the years. This is the scores specifically with reading, and this is the reading scores in particular. It says reading mathematics, but this focuses on the reading. 2012 is here, 2020, which is when testing stopped, and then 2023. So this is a direct correlation from 2020 to 2023. As you can see, all the percentiles drop in that frame. But if you're looking at the highest percentile, 90th percentile, it only dropped 3 percentage points. That's not going to significantly impact our students necessarily. But it's with our students that need the most support where you see a steeper decline. It's still technically only 7 points, but this is down the pipeline as they're getting ready to go through the rest of their high school education, trying to get out of high school education into college. This is where we're going to see the most threat to their resiliency, to their retention ultimately at the end of the day. So trying to anticipate that and build that resiliency, to build more of those kind of approaches into our courses seems to be timely as far as the data suggests. Whatever we're going to do has to factor in that we have some hurdles, especially for not our weakest students, because I feel like that's the wrong way to phrase it, but our students who haven't scored as well on the test, which is just quantified systems of education at this point. That's not theirs.
Seniors in high school.
I'm sorry?
Seniors in high school.
Yeah, this is actually, I believe, specifically
Age 13.
age 13.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Age 13, so it's as they're entering high school. So this is actually what we have coming down the pipeline to us specifically, as far as that goes. So, depending on how the high school system also continues to sort this, may have other impacts. But regardless, we have a bubble that will be coming down the system of some sort or another, as we've seen with COVID. Okay, this is another thing that we shared at the Hodge Institute, just to kind of give you a sense of where our current students are at for the sake of comparison. This is just the last academic year, 22 to 23. Has INDS's assessment categories, which includes oral, presentation, technological skills, and informational literacy, the 3 categories there. And then English 101, which has just 5 categories across the broad that we also assess. Context and again syntax were higher, as you can see there. We still didn't hit our benchmarks for 3 of the categories in English 101, which includes content, genre, and sources, though all 3 were up from prior years as the model that Sheila had just shared. But one thing to note is that sources are the lowest on this category. Is that informational literacy piece, I feel, where we tend to struggle a little bit more. Same with informational literacy in the INDS course. That's where we have the gaps in that assessment as well. And this tends to be, as you can see, these other categories are up in the 90s. There may be some issues with that assessment process or with the course content that we can continue to play with. But what we're really seeing here is that we're not necessarily meeting our students where we need to in a digital, informationally driven age. If this is informational literacy is part of our mission and our strategic plan, we can probably find some ways, even with the model that we have or with the changes we're making in the core, to really emphasize that and pull that together a little bit more. Okay, with that, we'd like to actually open it to a little bit of discussion on the same topic. I have some sample questions there that we kind of brainstormed and came up together to try to help figure out where we're to guide the discussion from here. Any question is open. These are just some general thoughts on the matter. Feel free, take it away. What maybe stands out to you? What have you seen with students? Or from maybe in some cases as a student perspective. What have you seen that stood out to you based on this conference finding?
Any questions at all for us in general?
Could you go back just one slide?
One slide to the assessment results?
Of course we have. So, all 3 of you have been very close to English 101 over multiple years of assessment, the ones that Sheila showed at the beginning and this one. What do you attribute the increases in the 22-23, right? Because we're talking anywhere between a 10-ish, 15% increase to almost a 30% in some cases. So is that the changes that have happened in the course? Is that a different population of students? What would you point to?
There's a few different models. One thing I would say that we did change was we switched the research, the assessment piece specifically.
Yeah, I think it's the artifact that we collect now.
We went from a literary analysis research paper to an argumentative research paper, which basically the shift was to try to make it a little bit more accessible to our students who really were struggling with literary analysis, based on only having a 1 4-week segment to really address that. So we still have literary analysis, but we don't assess that piece, and that's not the one that we require research on.
Yeah, so I think the change in assessment artifact, COVID, 20, the other data is from 2021, 21, 22. But also, so we actually didn't meet the benchmarks in any of this one. I just have the 37% because it was the closest. But I also think Sean has been a lot more intentional about having meetings with the English 101 instructors, and we did change the curriculum, not to the point where we needed to put a proposal through CSC, but that we we have more of the research in the argument paper now than in the literary analysis. So there's been more intentionality with the curriculum and also better assessment practices on the part of the English department.
I would also add potentially that we tried to work in two areas like SEMS 110, INDS 101. We tried to at least try to anticipate some of those prior weaknesses you saw in the English 101 assessment, to try to build those skills earlier in the other courses rather than them all kind of running off in their separate directions. So trying to coordinate towards like this informational literacy gap in particular that we were trying to address.
When I look at this data, and again, I know it's only 1 year of assessment, it sort of confirms some thoughts I have about IDNS, that in terms of delivering the technique of presenting, probably from high school prep or they're only familiar with technology, which might have been different when this curriculum was created. They're showing proficiency actually at a high percentage.
Extremely high.
But they're showing deficiency in the assessing the information that they're putting together.
Right.
How to assess it, and again, I hate wording the students here deficiencies, but
Right,
I mean,
right.
struggling to say, I'm doing this presentation on, wildflowers, and, I can do beautiful photos, I have the numbers come down and people are engaged by it, but I wasn't sure which of the many sources about wildflowers were valuable
Right.
and accurate.
Right.
Right, so
Yeah.
that, that's what strikes me. I've always questioned in English 101 about whether the focus should be on argumentative writing, getting them prepared to write the kind of writing, maybe not a research paper, but the genre of argumentative writing, which is
Right, we have those questions
right,
as
as
well.
opposed to literary analysis, what might be appropriate for intro to literature.
Right.
And should it really be, so that, when you tell me that you changed the assessment and got
Yes.
better results.
Yes.
And then, my last question is, the English department, as wonderful as it is across the country, we also tend to not underestimate that people are writing in every course.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening in those courses, I'm always asking.
Yeah.
And what's the relationship between the writing instruction in Intro to American History and the writing instruction?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I will say, just from tangential feedback, we do definitely see a lot of support from other classes, and part of what we've been trying to do is build those networks so there's more conversation around what's needed and how to address that. And there's still a lot of work to be done in English 101 too, just getting the ball rolling with that.
And the students.
It's a team.
Right. And the students that we were coming in 2017, which I believe is when this INDS 101 was changed and English 101 from OWE 1 and 2, an obvious statement, different students now, right? Just
I was
based on,
part of that OWE
Right.
class and initial INDS class, it was once a week.
yeah, so now this may have met the needs of our students then, but I do think discussions like this about if we are revising the core and have the opportunity to rethink English 101, INDS 101, or anything from the first year curriculum, this is great because then now we can think about what do our students need now and try to develop courses and curriculum that better meets those needs for our students. I don't want us to push past much more time, Jared, because I know Tressa has to present, so.
Can we ask the students here?
Yeah, I'm curious too.
Put you on the spot.
When you think about English 101, what are your thoughts on it? Did you take the
We're actually in Dr. Hall's classes.
Honors 113.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a question though.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there were limitations on what you can achieve like in one
Right.
semester. Do you think that's just because of time? Like if you think you had a longer time, you could achieve those goals, or do you think there's other like brick walls to it?
Brick walls, yes, you are at Dr. Hall's
Yeah.
class.
Last lecture, we teach that.
Yeah. It really does come down to time, because the
Yeah.
question is, can we teach research writing, argumentative writing, or can we teach not remedial per se, but basic writing skills?
Foundational skills.
Foundational
Yeah.
skills. So the idea is a lot of colleges have at least a 2-sequence model because people usually test out the first one, which is more about the mechanics, and then the research and argumentative portion really is the second half. So you have that second semester that everyone takes, and then people who need to take that first section, which if you have AP, college credits, etc., people usually test out of that one in particular. That's the general model.
It's a scaffolded maturity issue too, right?
Yeah.
If you have 2 semesters of writing, of whatever form that takes, it's not like you're just taking only writing. You're taking
Right.
a host of other classes
Yes,
along
exactly.
with it. And so you're maturing intellectually over 2 semesters and have the added benefit of working on writing as you do it. So I think
Yeah.
that's probably why that model exists.
And that's why even the third option, the remedial writing in particular, exists as well, because I had the third semester to take, it's not aimed so much, the entire model isn't aimed for this top percentile, it's aimed for these students that Thiel attracts a lot of first generation college students from diverse backgrounds that are going to disadvantage them not because of who they are, but because of the services and the inequitable society that they've had access to. It's about trying to fill the equity gap to try to help bring somebody from one point up to the same even playing field. That's the logic behind the course sequences. It's aimed down here.
We have to put our thinking caps on though,
Right.
because a sequenced curriculum in the first year.
Yeah, we're not suggesting that we have one. This is
Right.
what,
Yeah.
we need to be
Right.
more innovative with our thinking with that.
Innovate a little
Uh,
bit.
But how can
What-
those 2 courses?
What did you hear at the conference, or what are your own thoughts? Because there is a literature that warns against remedial classes.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And there's a lot of concern
Yeah.
about that.
Right.
Do we turn it around and say, before you could do this, you have to do this, you've done the 2 sequence, whatever they are, IDMS and this, and we think you need, in the envisioning phase, to take right, that would be a
Right,
different
so-
way of not remediating
The
before.
basic writing courses is what you're asking about, right?
Yeah.
Are usually what they would take first. Then they take regular college writing, then research writing. And that only works at a place that can handle placement testing, which we aren't able to do here. But we have the challenge of the college writing course serving the students who, aren't in DHI that are still performing high, and then who are at the bottom and being able to meet the needs, and you can do it. But in only one semester, you can't, it's difficult at least to instruct on informational literacy and grammar and syntax and how do you write an essay, what's the structure of a college essay, and thesis statements and summary and paraphrase and all of that. So we sort of think intentionally about where those skills go and which classes, yeah.
But again, when they do these basic writing courses, some
Yeah.
people would say if you can teach across the spectrum, you get the benefit of having that wire. As opposed to
Absolutely.
everyone's struggling with syntax.
Yeah, we
Right.
wouldn't be able to do a basic
Well,
writing course here.
In fact, the areas that we're doing, we're actually moving towards a model of self-placement in that kind of remedial class. Where it's only like, hey, I feel less confident in my writing. I'd like to place myself in that. We actually saw a couple panels that were talking about that as like a newer trend on that front.
Yeah.
Or optional support.
So I was gonna say, there are some I do teach those remedial courses at some state university, and there are some students do have a negative thoughts about
Yes.
themselves. They judge themselves more harshly for testing into that class. And I'm also an academic advisor there, so I do have some of those students that are in that class, and I compare it to how sometimes you have to start in the lower math class. They usually don't feel bad about yourself starting out college algebra before going into calculus. I actually, working with our STEMS 110 courses here, I did have students during our orientation day say, I'm not comfortable taking calculus, I'd like to take college algebra, I don't feel prepared. So sometimes having that option is also beneficial, but again, at such a small school, and I went to Thiel College, I had the same professor, Dr. Mullen, 8 times. It's not possible. It's not possible for us to have that remedial course here. Those 60 some of us adjuncts over there, those Matt and I in the English department over here, way different. So there can be negative connotations, but I think in the one semester course, the thing that challenges us is we sometimes are challenged to see all students' privileges, whether it's high privilege or like low privilege, less privilege, and what they come in on, and structuring the course to meet needs of all students, when some of those students could just advance into a second semester and focus on research, and some students need that both semester to focus on writing, to focus on identity work, to focus on exploring, and focus on other genres that they will need, like reflective writing and things like that, to continue throughout their disciplines.
Just to kind of tag that all together too, I don't think a 3-course model would work here. That's way beyond our scale. But whether we have a second writing course or not for English, I think the real takeaway in my mind is that need for more focus with informational literacy, whether it be digital literacy, informational literacy, navigating information in a digital world. Our students are facing an era where there's so much information at their fingertip that navigating that is almost overwhelming. How do we teach them to swim in that sea of information?
And doesn't that need to be done every course? Intro biology, what is a good article, right?
Right.
Library, right?
So I would say to answer your last question about how can we fix that, you do a pretty good job in the first year, but the problem is they're taking these classes during they're learning all of these things.
Yeah.
My goal has been, because of information literacy as part of the all college goals, we need to get it more into sophomore, junior, senior classes.
Yes.
And some majors we do very well with, and others we do not do very well with. So.
The teacher in me hates to kick off discussion when it's happening, but I don't want to do any disservice to our second presenter. So, everyone, thank you kindly for
Thank you so much.
Yes, we're going to be thinking about it from here on out, so I want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page. The policy that you're holding is our in-person copyright policy, and as I was talking about this to faculty last spring, we also drafted an online-only course policy. So today I'm really speaking of what we teach right now, our classes in person plus with our Moodle component. So some of our in-person classes have the online component. These are, what I'm discussing today is different than a fully online class. So I just wanted to talk about that. We're going to move on here to fair use. Fair use is one of the things that we think about in higher ed in terms of what copyright law is. We also think about the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and the TEACH Act, which is the Technology, Education, and Copyright Harmonization Act. Fair use basically is pretty much the most important thing we need to think about. So in fair use, fair use is part of the gigantic copyright law. Purpose and character of the use, nature of the work, amount and sustainability of the portion used, and effect of the use on the potential market for or value of the source work. So we need to think about these things as we're thinking about using things in our courses, as we're thinking about putting items in our papers or our poster presentations or things like that. So it's for faculty and students. And also the library is very involved because we're usually providing or trying to provide the materials that you would like to use. So the thing I want to focus on today is analyzing my use. So applying the copyright framework. So in breaking down copyright laws into a series of 5 questions, and these are the 5 questions, this will help determine the legalities of the use. These questions build on each other and should be answered in the order presented. So I'm going to talk about the questions, and then we're actually going to do some sample case studies and think about how these questions relate to in the classroom scenarios. So, is the work protected by copyright? A lot of times faculty come to me and say, is it protected? And so I don't know, no one knows, that's why we have to figure these things out. Is there a particular exception in copyright law that covers my use? Is there a license that covers my use? Is my use considered fair use? And we just talked about the 4 factors of fair use. And do I need permission from the copyright owner for my use? I would like to make the comment that a lot of times in education, teachers, faculty, professors think they're covered. They think it's covered because they're using it for an educational purpose, and that's really not true. We just like to say that because it makes it easier for all of us. So we're looking at these, So I'm gonna go ahead and go to our next slide, and we can talk about these case studies kind of out loud. And if you would like to, because we have such a small group. So case study number 1. The cost of your textbook has skyrocketed and you'd like to make copies of the book so you can save your students money. So Pastor Brian is saying.
I'm gonna say that's probably not fair use.
That is not fair use, that would not work. However, if you're using like a chapter of a book and the library owns the book or we have a copy, we can put parts of that book on electronic reserve to help students, which Dr. Butcher is doing and Dr. Hanneman is also doing, and we're testing out electronic reserves. The electronic reserves, which I'll explain right after this, is a good way to help in that way. We can't scan the whole book. Copyright does not like time, can't prescribe time, and it does not like prescribe portions. It has to be spontaneous, and the access has to be controlled. So with Dr. Butcher's class and with Dr. Hannon's class, we actually have controlled our electronic reserves to go through Moodle, so only the students in the course have access to the reserve. So that's another good thing we can do. It's not available to all students, it's just the students in the course. So second, you have a fantastic historical video that you use to help teach students about World War II. Unfortunately, it is on an old VHS tape. You've looked to see if you can buy it on DVD, but it is not available in this format. What do? I really want to show, Dr. Hall really wants to show this VHS in her class. We still have a VHS player in the library if it still works. We can still do it. Who has a thought?
I say that's okay.
That's okay.
You're gonna
So
wheel the player into the classroom and show them.
And we own the VHS.
Right.
yes. So if we own the VHS, so this thing then, if it was broken, that would be where, and we can no longer buy it. That would be where we would have to find something else. There is a part of copyright law that allows libraries for archival purposes to fix it, and then you're able to use parts of it. But if it's broken, we have to move on. Yes, so you're right, this is still usable. It's always
be we own the VHS and you're gonna show it in class.
That's the other thing. The answer is yes, but then did that VHS have public performance rights? And most did not. Most did not in the past. So we're saying yes based on what we did 10 years ago, but yes.
Number 4.
Yeah, which kind of goes to number 4. So number 4, would you like to show a copy? You would like to show a copyrighted video in its entirety to your class for instructional purposes. So I will say, and who doesn't know about public performance rights? Okay, that's fine. It's kind of a new thing that we talk about. The person who's videoing doesn't know about public performance rights. These are rights that can be purchased when you purchase an electronic document. And so, for example, if I was purchasing a DVD, I could purchase those rights and it would be more, but then anyone at the college could show it. Most times in education, and my husband's in education, so I know teachers and I know how this works. They think, oh, I have the DVD, I have the VHS, I'll just show it, and that's what's always been done.
Personal copy of VHS.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
You can't show that.
Correct. Yes, so we have to be careful with the public performance rights. However, we've always done this for so long that the question comes in, can I still do this? So that's kind of where we are. Number 4.
I have a question.
Yes.
The videos or anything like that in the library, were they purchased with instructional ability to show in class?
Now I do that. The ones that we have in the past that were donations do not always have that. Yes. Anything that we now have from our databases online have all of those rights. Yeah. So it's kind of the fixing of the before. Yes.
But I think this also comes up if, let's say, I have Netflix subscription and I want to log into my personal Netflix subscription to show video, that also violates it.
That's correct, yes, that's very correct. Yeah, and this came up a lot during COVID in terms of people wanted online access to show things, and they were not near the library, and, so this is because of COVID, not just with Thiel, but all these questions have come up, so it's kind of more of the forefront. You teach American literature every semester, and you would like to distribute a copied journal article that analyzes a short story each time you teach the class.
I do that.
You do that.
You
Okay.
can't
You can't do
You do it one time, you do it one
That's
semester.
right. You do. So God bless. I'm gonna talk about Nancy Castor. Her last semester she was teaching. She had me come in and talk about plagiarism to her education course. So also in this education course, she was passing out a photocopied article from like 1983. It was like the seminal article about autism. So they were talking about autism, and she's passing this out, and I'm talking about this, and she's like, "Can I do this?" Because we were, and she's like, "Because I purchased this in 1983, and I've always shared it with my students." So, and it was classic. It was great. So I said, "Yes, you purchased it for you to use in 1983 for yourself. You didn't purchase it for all the years to distribute to your class." So we're at different levels of things, and so for Mary Teresa, the photocopied articles, this is what we can do. If they're available online through our databases, we can just share one of our permanent links with you for class. If it's not available, we can talk about how we want to put that on electronic reserves, or the library can obtain the article in a way that you can use it, and then we can do it that way. So there's options that way.
So, Jessica,
Yes.
maybe a point you're going to mention, I'm sorry for jumping ahead, but let's say Neil wants to use a paper that I wrote, right? He can go to the journal, which we don't have a subscription to, so he's not going to be able to get the direct access to our database. But if he were to ask me, one of the authors, could I share a copy with him? Because I don't have copyright for all of the authors on the journal, right? So we still would have to go through the proper method.
Yeah, you would, because depending on what the agreement with your journal, they might actually hold the copyright, none of the authors.
Yeah. In some of the neuroscience journals, the authors still do, up until, I think it was 2010, they started to change.
Right.
Yeah, so again, this situation shows like it's always very iffy. And just because one of the authors would have said yes, doesn't mean that everybody else
But
does.
if a professor has a manuscript that has not been published yet, or paper, a presentation from a professional conference that another colleague wants to use, they could distribute that because it has not been copyrighted.
Exactly. No, yes, and then they could also give permission for their own work, yes. Very good. You plan to show your students an instructional presentation that includes displaying copyrighted photographs and incorporates copyrighted music. Well, we do that all the time, right? But we tell our students that we need to credit that.
Right.
Yes. So I think for educational purposes within our institution, it's okay. We do that, in presentational literacy all the time. We do need to credit it. If you're going outside of the institution, you need to get public permission for the music and for the photos from the.
And don't you think, Jessica, that you have to be careful that in every year you do this in your class, PowerPoint that always has that photo, and even if it's credit, always has that music. Then you're in the gray zone because
Yes.
you're really using it for continued use. But
Exactly.
you put this PowerPoint together and you use it for a semester and then you change it around. You always have the credits. It's really that time, right?
Yes, I'm really glad you mentioned that. So this has to do with the timing. So the copyright doesn't like prescribed timing, and it doesn't like access all the time. So for example, in the online policy that we created, things on Moodle, things on the LMS need to be taken down after the class is over, and that makes it okay, because then when you put it back up, it's a fresh course. Yes, if you're thinking of using those same images or the same content, it just needs to be re-added. And when I tell faculty this, I mean, I'm the same way. Faculty are like, I created this class, this is how I teach, this is what I use. Nancy Castor used the same article since 1983, you know, and so I think I'm sympathetic to that, but if we are going through these, if we're jumping through the correct hoops, I think we're also okay, but it also helps stimulate changing our content every once in a while as well too. You are planning on sharing with your students an exemplary research paper created by a former student so they know how to format their upcoming assignment. We do this in the Honors 330. And I'm hoping that permission was asked from all of these students. There is also a caveat with that. If these honors presentations were created for the institution owns them. I think maybe that was or owns them in terms of display of them. I think that could have been also the thought in what we're doing.
For assessment purposes, but not necessarily for sharing.
Yeah, our
Quasi-public,
intellectual history, our intellectual property policy, which Liz worked on, makes clear that student content and faculty content are owned by the creators.
So we hopefully should have gotten permission from the students to keep showing their theses every year. Okay, good. Good to know. This is helping me also.
Pull up the policy.
I-
and make sure
I
that
will- I will pull it up. That's
Well,
good to know.
when I've done that in my classes, what I typically had started with is I actually have them sign the release,
Okay.
right? And it was just an easy way to make sure that we were all clear what we were going to use it for, so they could actually have that on file. So I can have it on file, but then they also understood what I was asking for.
That very
Because I
well
found
could
when I
have
just,
happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you just ask a student, hey, can I use your work in this context, they may not understand exactly what you're saying, or that it might be in perpetuity, right?
Yes.
So even though it was more formalized, it helped them to understand that.
And I guess that was the last one. Who has some comments about some of these questions? It's kind of stressful for me to go in and tell faculty or tell students, like, you have to do these things. Yes.
So, in Dr. Hall's class,
Yes.
we're told that we have a worksite page. Why couldn't we just like cite them and then that's how we're getting permission? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. You should always cite, but that's not the permission. So, and an explanation of copyright kind of is like, you own the rights to your paper or your picture or your book. So just because you're saying you use information from that, the owner is not getting financial
Yeah,
credit.
but I think what you mean, in a regular term paper, you use a quotation. You can use a quotation and put a citation and you're not breaking any laws.
Yes.
Because you're using a select
That's
small part, that is, but you must cite it.
Right.
But if you were to take a book and Xerox copy it and sell it, you've broken the law. Because you're taking someone's property and you're selling it without them getting any
Or
Or
when
using
Nancy,
it.
when Nancy,
Even if you don't sell
sell it, you're right, even if
When-
you don't sell it,
yes.
exactly right,
just a
yeah,
copy.
just a copy.
or when Nancy Castor handed that to all of her students, you know, that author from 1983 was not making money off
But
of
Teresa,
it.
what I like about your leadership on this is you have come up with very creative ways to help our faculty be able to share texts by using Moodle, put it up, take it down, portions. So, you know, it's not, because of your leadership, we're able to say, okay, click on this link, rather than being handed a copy, it comes up electronically. I guess the students could print it out, right?
Yeah, but they're allowed to do that because they're part of that institution, and then it's part of their rights is access to what we paid for, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then the class gets taken down.
Mhm. And then we can do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for that. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate being able to work with faculty and students and be able to do things like that. So let's talk about electronic course reserves. Thank you, Susan, that was a good lead-in. Some benefits. Students can access portions of books and articles electronically. Access is controlled by the library and Thiel authentication. So again, it's behind the wall of not available to everyone, but just available to students in that select course. Timing and amount of access is determined by the faculty. So again, Dr. Butcher, Dr. Hannon, they have said to us, this article, this chapter will get posted for this section of time, and then it gets taken down, and then this other section gets posted for the next 3 or 4 weeks. It allows multiple students to access at once, so that's the other benefit, that you're not coming and physically touching a reserve book, which you still can, so anyone in the class at any time of the day can see the readings that need to happen, and during the night, because it's 24 hours. Particularly useful if only a portion or 3 chapters of a book are required. So we are still piloting this semester. We want to say yes to everything, and we have been doing that. But the work behind the scenes, what happens is the material is copied, scanned, and then it gets uploaded. The good thing about using the Moodle in the background is that, like, Dr. Butcher might be teaching us to have class again, so next time this happens, we can turn it back on. So the work is big in the beginning, but won't be so onerous as the years goes on, or when Dr. Hanman wants to do his courses again. So we have kind of a repository of information that's turned off and controlled in the background. So that's also helpful to us, and also is a way around copyright. So I'm going to show you real quick, if we didn't know how this works. This is our library catalog, and right here it says course reserves. We have a tab there, and if we type in Butcher in the tab, we can see Dr. Butcher's class. And then this is a portion of what he has on reserve. So there's 2 different things. He has this book physically on reserve. So it says, student, you can come to the library desk, you can talk to the student, and they will give you this book, and you can touch it and you can read it. The other portion is, this is your electronic section of this, and then you are then able to see just the scanned images. So I actually want to log into the library and do that and show you that can happen real quick, how fast that will be. And so we will do this, show you quickly. So again, Tom Catalog is here. Course reserves are right here, and you were always able to look up course reserves even if it was just a physical book. And Dr. Butcher's class, just like I showed on the slide. Here is the physical book, and then here is the link to his Moodle course here. I will log into Moodle. Anyway, we should be able to see it, but you would see the scan. So that is how students would get to it.
Yeah, I think that works very good. Today in class, actually, we opened the PDFs. Every student had their own computer open. They could read it and move along with it if they wanted to. The benefit, when Tressa came to talk to the students about this activity, she pointed out that you can download a PDF or print it if you choose to. So it was very accessible to the students to use.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we talked about a lot of things. Does anyone have questions? Or, yes?
Yeah, when a student has downloaded that PDF, then what happens to it when it's on their computer? At what point in time?
So my understanding is that wouldn't be automatically removed from their computer, but we can control the link and we can deactivate the link so they couldn't activate it. They couldn't access it in the future.
Okay.
But when they make the copy themselves, it's theirs, whether it's electronic
Yes.
or print.
So it goes on them then. So they're allowed to view it on their screen. They're allowed to print it out. They're allowed to download it on their computer, but then what they do with it from there is then on them. But we have provided it in the way that we are supposed to provide it to them.
It doesn't just like disappear out of their computer.
No.
right?
No, it's downloaded. So you download it and then it's linked onto your computer's
okay,
part,
I
and
got
then you put it on your desktop.
So you have used this electronic service?
I haven't used this way, but I have to download stuff for my communications classes. So like uncopyrighted music,
Good. Oh, good. Okay, so
drive stuff, and stuff from hardware. And you just have to get rid of the link when it's in Safari,
yes, so
and
you-
also delete it
But
too.
then it's also then onto you. You were allowed to legally use it for how it was given to you, and then you are responsible then going forward. Yes.
This doesn't open us up to any sort of liability of providing a way for students to essentially access and do the download, because once it's in their hands or on their computer, they can do whatever they want with it. They can post it, on the internet for people to download it from them. And so there's not a concern from the institutional perspective that this is happening. It's just, they would have their own copyright issues to deal with.
Correct. So yes, that's a good question. As long as faculty in their class and library has done their due diligence, then it's on the student.
Because it's analogous to picking up the physical book in the library, scanning it, and then doing the same types of things.
I'm sorry, Susan.
Oh, I see that. Because I was sort of going along with Jared saying like, should we just have it read only? But now that you give this example, they take a book that's copyrighted and they Xerox it. We're not involved at all, and they use it.
Okay. A lot of times
There's
I don't.
certainly a lower hurdle
Yeah.
from just hitting the download button as opposed to physically.
Yeah, I had a question about, there's now a lot of videos that I've used that are now, at least in part, on YouTube. So that's the same issue, but to show a YouTube
Right.
version, that's what where's the how.
I'm glad you brought that up. I use YouTube videos too, and in the online course, I actually kind of address that. It's best practice now is to not use them because YouTube is not sanctioned in terms of sometimes they're allowed and sometimes they're not. So basically, in what I have read, it has said that YouTube is not. I think it's actually in maybe it's actually yeah. What does it say? Yes. What about YouTube?
During the videos, some of them are copyrighted, technically instead of trying hard to remove copyright posted to YouTube.
Now, what can happen though is that you can direct, a lot of times you can put it on the student. So you can say, I want you to go to this website and watch it yourself. And that would be different from actually airing it in class. So then if you place it on the student or publicly available links, your students are still allowed to open them and view them. It's just not you're airing them in class. That's the slight difference.
So if I send them home with the link and they all open it and watch it, that's fine, but if I open the link in class and show it to them all, that's.
Correct. You could even have a link posted in Moodle and say, this is, view this.
This is the assignment.
View it,
Okay.
because you're not showing it.
Okay,
Yes.
what is Creative Commons? The safest way is to use Creative Commons option under the filter in your search result.
So Creative Commons is a place where you can get videos, you can get images, you can get other pieces of information that you're allowed, music is in there, that you're allowed to then use in your courses. So Creative Commons is more sanctioned than YouTube, I would say. And again, I'm not the expert, but I think as the questions come forth, we could do more. A lot of times it's, let's figure this out together, and that's how we are going about this. So for now, I think a lot of faculty are doing a great job. I'm excited to try this, the electronic reserves, and as questions come up, we'll go from there. And I'd like to have conversations with faculty as we are moving forward when we purchase things. For example, we just purchased an ebook subscription for Mary Beth in the SLP that she wants all of her students to use, masters and undergrad. But we were able to talk it out, and the rights to that subscription only allows us to have three users at a time. But the benefit is that it's online all the time, and 3 of her students can be using it. So it's worth having a conversation. Like I called the publisher, like certain publishers have different rules. So that wasn't like we could have full access. Like full access did not exist. Seek access existed. So there's a whole new world of things. But if we have a conversation and we talk about the need, it's very exciting. So I'm all for that. Other questions? Thank you for talking about copyright today.